The whistle tells you this is the measure of an episode. Our continuing mission is to explore what makes a Star Trek episode a proper Star Trek episode and not just quality, chef's kiss TV like this episode was, using 3 criteria. Paul, what is it?
3 criteria. Number 1 is, does it have some sort of expression of science fiction? The second one, does it have some sort of expression of morality? And Jonathan, what's the third?
That je ne sais quoi that makes it Star Trek.
That thing that we can't think of.
So we leave it to you listeners. If you have an idea,
That's right.
Email us at themeasureofanepisode@gmail.com and tell us what your thoughts are on what the third thing is that makes a Star Trek episode proper Star Trek. Right. Oh, I don't.
Yeah.
You already said my name, but hi, Paul.
Oh, hi, Jonathan. Did I say Jonathan?
You did.
I don't think I said Jonathan.
Yeah. This time around, we actually took a request from our Patreon contributor, Mike, and he suggested that we do Chain of Command. He said it's one of his favorites. It's one of the best episodes of Star Trek in general. So, stands to reason that it would be one of his favorites.
This episode was interesting because I obviously remembered the episode when it was suggested to us, but
what you remember is part 2.
Well, yeah, exactly. And part 1, and it's weird because I had thought that the whole thread of the a-hole captain that takes command of the Enterprise was an entirely different episode.
Interesting. Okay.
So I guess I should read the blurb.
Oh yeah.
I only have the first part blurb, I think. Picard is replaced as captain of the Enterprise, so he, Worf, and Dr. Crusher can go on a secret mission into Cardassian space. I don't know if there's a blurb for part 2.
While the humorless Captain Jellicoe leads an effort to prevent a Cardassian invasion, the captured Captain Picard is tortured by an interrogation expert.
Well,
I mean, yeah.
You get right to it.
Right.
Spoilers. So I guess on the outset, I don't really consider this to be a proper Star Trek episode. Just to color our discussion a little bit, I felt as though, while a good episode and engaging episode, it was definitely probably one of the darkest Next Gen episodes ever made. There's some pretty heavy, like,
it was actually edited for foreign countries because the torture was considered too graphic.
Yeah.
Which I think is interesting because there's not really like all of the torture is psychological and self-inflicted. There's no abuse in the same way like what happened to Kirk and McCoy in The Empath.
Right. I mean, they do have this little box, this implant, which I actually thought. So when they ripped off all of Picard's clothes to humiliate him, to tear him down as a person,
mm-hmm.
They had the scar, and I thought the scar was. I actually wrote it down. It's like, oh, that's great. What great attention to detail. They put the scar
from his Academy attack, right?
Yeah, from his heart thing. I was like, oh, what a nice little moment of like cohesiveness.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out it wasn't, so I deleted the note. I was very disappointed. I didn't get to bring that up, and I'm bringing it up.
Well, yeah, I wrote the same note. Yep.
Yeah.
You're jumping into part 2, so are we just going to be talking about both altogether?
I think we should. I think that the first part is so set up that it would be kind of. It'd be like making a book about the last Harry Potter book and making a movie about the first chapter, and then making a second part about every chapter after the first chapter. That's a callback, but also a great analogy. Are you keeping note of all of my great analogies, by the way?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Okay.
I'm recording them.
Okay, good. Excellent.
What callback, though? What are you talking about?
We talked about Harry Potter and the camping and everything, right?
Okay, yeah.
We've talked about that, right?
Yeah.
That was part 6, 7? Part 7. Then part 8. Yeah.
Book 7, part 1.
Did they do parts in the movies, though?
They did the Deathly Hallows part 1 and the Deathly Hallows part 2. Yeah,
okay.
They didn't name it differently.
It's like Cynical Cash Grab part 1 and Cynical Cash Grab part 2.
Right. And then every other last book in every series did that as well.
Yeah. It was a great idea.
So one of the things that I thought was interesting is what we've talked about basically since episode 2 of our podcast is the main conflict is introduced before the opening titles. So it's in the cold open, and it kind of ends on what the main conflict is going to be. The part 1 did not do that at all. Like, we're 6 seasons in, and so just the cliffhanger was, I'm relieving you of command.
Which was great. Like, again, I don't want to sound like a broken record here, but it literally just jumps into the action.
Oh, yeah.
Nechayev jumps into Picard's ready room.
Right.
And then somersaults, and then stands up to him and says, I'm relieving you of duty.
And he's like, you lost your comm badge. She goes, I don't need it.
And I really wanted it to happen, another Leslie Nielsen moment, where she says, I'm here to relieve you of your command of the Enterprise. And the camera slowly pushes into Picard, and he says, oh, thank God. I thought you'd never come.
Right. But yeah, like I mean, I think the whole thing was less than 2 minutes. She's basically standing there being like, okay, yeah, I need to talk to him all by myself. And she's like, yeah, you're fired.
And this sets off the first, and not the a series of events where Riker just looks butthurt the entire 2 episodes.
That's so true.
So Picard he's like taken from command, and we feel like we're never going to see him again, even though we see him in the next scene, even though he's still on the ship. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I thought he was going to be gone from the ship. He's still on the ship doing stuff.
Yeah, doing the training. Yep, which was so cool, but so weird. Like, because once he was no longer the captain, I thought he was off the ship, and then they showed him doing the training, and then they had the scene later on where Riker goes to see Picard. Like when he said, I'll talk to him, I thought he was going to like do one of the comm pads, where they're basically talking to their laptops, they're Skyping with each other. And so when he like goes into his quarters, I was like, whoa, oh, he's still here.
When they first cut to Picard and the team and Crusher and Worf practicing, rehearsing or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
They made it seem like they were already in the midst of their mission. And then it's like, computer pause program. And you're like, oh, I should have seen that coming. They do that every other.
Right. Oh, you got me again.
I know. They get you every time.
Every time. Almost. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was weird because Worf and Crusher are wearing hoods, and they look absolutely ridiculous.
Yes. That was the only time that we saw them in training, though. Yeah? Wait, they didn't wear them on the planet?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Here's what I think happened. They saw the dailies. That was the first shot, or the first scene they shot. And they're like, I think we should lose the hoods like on the second day, because like they look absolutely ridiculous, and it makes it look like a comedy.
Right, and no time for reshoots.
Yeah, there wouldn't be any time for reshoots.
Yeah, I mean, and it kind of works out in a roundabout way. It's just weird that they used it for the practice, but not the actual mission.
Right, and why wear the hoods, but just over your hair? I thought the whole point was not to keep them warm, but to make them anonymous.
I liked that they explained why it was Worf and Crusher.
Yes.
And it wasn't just randomly the doctor was joining them.
It made sense.
Yeah.
There was a whole... I did feel like... I feel like it should be more than 3 people, but I understood why it wasn't. Like,
right.
It was enough. They explained it enough where it had to be small, and it had to be people we knew who they were, and I'm guessing maybe there was a conversation in the writer's room that was thrown around. It's like, should we insert somebody who the audience doesn't know so we can kill them later? And they're like, we've kind of worn that trope out. I think they're going to see it coming. So let's just put the 3 of them.
So true. Yeah. Well, and I thought it was kind of funny that, he's like, Worf, you're along for obvious reasons.
Yes, you love my poetry, Captain.
I wasn't expecting this on such short notice, but I'll do an improv.
Yeah. Starts flipping through his notebook of poems.
It is a good day to rhyme.
Not Another Haiku is the name of one of his haikus.
Which doesn't work, actually. Like, the name doesn't work in a haiku.
Well, I mean, I think Worf is always speaking in haikus. They're just a long stream of haikus.
As long as it's 17 syllables. What if they started doing that on purpose?
Well, we're all kind of speaking in haikus by accident, right?
Right. We're all kind of speaking in haikus by accident. Nope, you were too off.
This works out. Oh, damn it.
Well, okay, if you add in the sort of. We're all kind of speaking in haikus by accident, sort of.
See?
Yep, you're right.
Works
17
out.
syllables every
Yep.
time. All right.
Patreon.com.
So one of the things that I really liked, and obviously I didn't see this until this rewatch, but Jellicoe is nice. Like, as a person, he listens. He's actually conversational, and he's got pictures of his kids up in his office. Like he's a family man, and overall he's a nice guy. It's just he is a very by the books captain, and he knew ways to get the ship ready for a battle that how it wasn't currently set up.
Right. It was. I'm glad you brought that up, because to me, I was very torn about Jellicoe, because obviously they wrote him in such a way that they wanted us to not like him as the audience.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
We were not supposed to like Jellicoe. Yet, as you say, all the things he was doing seemed reasonable.
Yes.
And I didn't understand why Riker was so butthurt the whole time. And then Geordi was butthurt. And then Troy was butthurt. Because, okay, so Riker as the first officer would have all of these sort of managerial, banal duties, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
But we just don't see them on every episode. Like, I'm assuming that well, I don't. Wouldn't his duties be the same under Picard in some fashion? Wouldn't he have to do some of these just like, this kind of sucks. This is just paperwork.
Right. So what I took from it was, it's one of those things, like, I think this is why he was taking Data with him everywhere. He was like, I want to make sure that my demands are doable, and and Data being able to do the quick calculations. Like, nobody could say, like, when he was in engineering, nobody could say that what he was asking for was impossible. And then the kind of like the switching to 4 shifts, Riker was like, we haven't done that yet, and I want to talk to you, like, we don't have a team for that. And he was like, well, I told you to do it, so you need to do it.
Right.
And I felt like that's kind of where the butthurt all started. He's like, we're not having a conversation. You're my superior, and I don't like that. Well,
it just seemed like they just assigned Riker a new mommy, and he didn't like that.
Oh, that's totally what it was. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it just didn't feel, so it seemed unreasonable that Jellicoe would characterize Riker as a bad officer, because there was, just because there was a lot of detail that had to happen after that one singular order that Jellicoe gave to Riker. It seemed like that was unreasonable to say, like, oh, he's obviously a crappy first officer. Whatever you say, Picard,
Right. Yeah. I'll go ahead and let him suck on your teeth.
Although it does seem like Jellicoe's orders did seem punitive in a way, sort of passive-aggressively punitive. Like, he was kind of making his orders 25% more difficult to carry out, just because he wanted to demonstrate how soft the Enterprise was and how the Enterprise needed him. Yeah,
but the other part of it that I took was that he's been dealing with the Cardassians, which is why he was there, and he kind of has a bit more of like a defensive battle perspective. Like when he was talking about how, like, all of those stations were going to be taken offline, and he was kind of like, well, we're not here to do research. Like, that's not what we're doing right now.
Right. Which makes him a bad choice as a negotiator. Right? If he's already in war mode, he's sort of when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail type of thing. Like, you don't want that person seeing, like, which he kind of does.
Yeah.
It's like when you go into a negotiating room in the first 5 minutes, he's like, I want this. The other guy says no. It's like, well, I guess we're going to war then. Right?
Yeah.
Too bad. It was interesting when Jellicoe orders Troy to change her clothes.
Uh-huh.
In the room while he watched. No, that's not true.
Now, Deanna, slowly.
That was kind of a... If you want to break it down, it's sort of misogynist. Again, it wouldn't be a Star Trek episode if there wasn't a little bit of misogyny. But, like, that's the one thing that Jellicoe honed in on was her outfit,
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of the writing, that's the one thing that Jellicoe changed about her was not her... He didn't dress her down figuratively, he dressed her down literally.
Well, but he dressed her up. Like, he was basically saying, like, you're showing too much skin.
Which basically means he wanted to have sex with her, I'm guessing. Like, that's what I pulled. That's what I always pull when somebody says you're dressed too nice. Like, it's sort of a compliment, like disguised and yeah,
in a lecherous way.
Yeah.
Just anytime they're like, I like your tie. You're like, I'm not having sex with you.
I'm not going to take it off, including my pants. My pants are staying on.
Well, that escalated quickly.
Yeah.
All right, but just make it quick.
Yeah. Fine.
Just somebody compliments your tie and you just start taking your pants off.
Sorry. I just thought we would skip all the business and get right to the action.
What are you doing? I like Snoopy.
So there was a scene, I don't know if you noticed or not, but so keeping with this is not in widescreen, this is in sort of it's in a square kind of TV format. There's a moment where Riker and Geordi are sort of having a conversation about Jellicoe and the unreasonableness of his orders as they're walking down the hallway.
Right.
And it's sort of a poor blocking choice by the director, because they come to a stop at the end of their conversation and they both turn to each other and they're like 1.5 inches away from each other's face.
Right.
and it was so awkward. Like, I wanted Geordi to just give Riker a little peck on the cheek before they parted ways.
Well, and what's funny about that too is like the 1.5 inches was basically vertical because of how much taller Jonathan Frakes is than LeVar Burton.
Right. Like, you wanted him to end that conversation, so don't F with me, Geordi? You know, like,
right.
Because their conversation was not adversarial, but their
right.
positioning was.
Well, yeah. I'll go have a word with Picard, Geordi. So don't mess with me.
So don't mess with me again. Anyway, so then we get to that scene where Picard and et al. Finally leave to go on their mission, and they have that awesome teller scene where they talk about metagenics.
So hang on really quick. I want to go back to the scenes where Riker is getting all butthurt at 10 Forward.
Yeah.
Because the ceremony of the passing of the command from Picard to Jellicoe, like, were they called there to see this 20-second ceremony? Everybody?
Or did they just set up while everyone was having their break and their off time?
Right.
And whoever happened to be in there was witness to the ceremony?
Right. Like, can you imagine being called? They're like, you have to be there for the passing of the command. You're like, oh, okay, fine. Thinking it'll be like 45 minutes or something. You're dressed in formal, like it's on your break. And they're like, I relieve you of duty. I stand relieved. All right, everyone. Drinks all around. It's like, what? All right, anyway, So everybody jumps off the ship.
And that was just a fun little scene of, I guess that's the only true expression of science fiction where they're talking about metagenics and why it's so dangerous. And even the Romulans agreed to never do any further research on this, that it could be bad for everybody. And it was sort of fun to listen to.
Yeah, well, and what made it so great, it was exposition in a way where the plot demanded it, not in a way where the audience had to hear it.
Right. And it answered just enough questions as to why the three of them were chosen, and just enough questions as to where they were going and how they did it. I kind of would have preferred, if it were me, I would have cut the whole Jellicoe thing. I understand that was what they chose to sort of give the ship business while Picard was on his trip, his vacation. But I would have rather they.
This isn't Ryza.
It was. So you said we were going on vacation. This is not the. I didn't say anything when you made us wear the hoods, but now I must put my foot down. I would have rather it was a longer sort of, how do we get to a Cardassian space? And so it wasn't just, oh, we have to go see this guy and then magically they're there. So it was more of a kind of, more of an adventure, I guess. And how do we get to Cardassian space without being detected?
Right. So here's a really cool fact. So DS9 started in January. Like January 23rd was the first episode, Emissary. It was supposed to be a fall release. So season 6 and season 1 would have been going concurrently from the beginning. And that scene was not only filmed in DS9, and it was filmed dark so you couldn't see what was happening around the rest of the set, but that was actually supposed to be Quark. and the audience was going to know Quark because DS9 had started. And since it didn't, the only thing they changed was, so it was going to be that they went to DS9 as a waypoint to get to Cardassian territory, and Jellicoe was going to ask to use Type 7 shuttle, or Class 7, Type 7, one of the two, shuttle from DS9, but it actually, yeah. So it actually.
Do you know why they didn't?
Because we didn't know Quark yet. Because it didn't. This aired in the fall, and DS9 started in the spring.
Oh, well, it's funny. So that particular scene, they basically have Beverly like jerking off the Ferengi to get what she wanted.
Yep, rubbing his crotch. Yeah,
yeah. It's just it's so awkward.
It's just weird. When you start, like, I mean, you know, when you're watching it, you're like, okay, she's, like, kind of flirting with him and seducing him, whatever. But the moment you give it any thought about, like, what the ears represent, like, the fact that you can pinch them and you're basically squeezing their balls, and you can, like, stroke them and you're basically giving them a hand job, you're right. Like, it suddenly makes it so much more awkward and uncomfortable.
Yeah, and I kind of look at Beverly more as a mom character than I do as sort of a sexy character, because she's playing it sexy.
Oh, for sure.
Like she's trying to be sexy to seduce him. And I just don't. It didn't come through for me.
Right, and for me, like the way she plays it is kind of like a helpless, like a damsel in distress type, like seduction, and it just. You're right. Being the like motherly character, for her to go from motherly to like being needing to be taken care of.
Yeah.
Like it just is uncomfortable.
And by the way, so Solak, who is the person who supposedly is who they're seeking out to get them transit to wherever they're going, was the Ferengi they're talking to that guy?
That was the impression that I got. Yes, like he was pretending not to be that person, but then as they were talking to him. Like, he kind of let it slip that that's who it was. That was how I took it, yeah.
And then they do some repelling. They finally get to Cardassian space, and they infiltrate the caverns, and then they start rappelling down. And I know this is a nitpick or anything, something like that, but they don't have better tech now for getting down...
For rappelling, right?
Large, like, for rappelling. Like, they don't sort of hover thing that they can just... I don't know.
And I wonder how long that conversation was had in the writer's room. Like, is there any way that we can futurize rappelling down a cliffside? Yeah, but I feel like rappelling has been in, like, all the series at some point, including the newer movies. I feel like there's a scene in one of the new movies where they do rappel. And so, yeah, I mean, it's just... I mean, it's just so much fun to do. Nobody's ever thought to, like, advance that technology.
Right. It's like, we've come up with a way to get from the top of a mountain to the bottom of a mountain instantaneously. And everyone's like, oh.
Right.
We don't get to rappel anymore. So then we get back to the Enterprise thread, and Jellicoe is heading up the negotiations. And this is basically...
Well, hey, are we into part? We're into part 2 now, aren't we?
No, this is part 1.
Oh, this is still part 1?
Still in part 1.
Okay.
So we meet sort of the Cardassian guy that Jellicoe kind of messes with, tries to, he manipulates him. But this little sort of segment where they're negotiating, right? It feels like Deep Space Nine in a bottle.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
It felt like someone at Paramount saw this scene and was like, wait a minute. What if we had an entire show that was just like this the whole time?
So the Cardassian conflict was written by Ronald D. Moore, who kind of was one of the writing supervisors for all of DS9. But also, again, like now knowing where this was in production, I feel like that kind of makes a lot more sense that it felt that way, because this was supposed to be during the first season of DS9, but it actually is kind of like a precursor to it. And so this was showing how Cardassia lost their hold over Bajor in this episode.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense.
Right.
I guess they want to have some sort of cohesion between the two shows.
Yeah, but no, I agree completely. Like it is DS9 in a nutshell, like everything that happens in this. Like
it's a perfect proto scene of everything that happens in Deep Space Nine. And that was sort of my complaint.
Oh, except nobody turns into a god in the.
There's no magical beings
right.
that can somehow just create, manipulate space.
That they find in the transporter.
Yeah. Or just as a cloud somewhere, just a cloud hovering through space. And then we see that Picard is caught by Trek veteran David Warner.
Yes.
Who plays a Klingon. Klingon?
In the original series, yeah.
In the original series movie.
Right. Yeah.
I think Undiscovered Country? No. Is it?
I think so. I did not write it down.
So tune in next week, everybody, for more Star Trek trivia that we're pretty sure is accurate. It's really funny, like that. I mean, you know way more about Star Trek than I do, right? Way more. But I'm still part of this podcast somehow. And we also find out, at least this is the first time that I noticed, that Picard's like little laptop that sits on his desk in his ready room, it's basically a screen with one giant button on it. because Jellicoe's using it, he's talking to Nechayev.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, all right, over and out, Jellicoe out. And he just hits the giant, like, Staples button that's on the front of the laptop.
Right.
And I think that's the end of part 1, right there.
I was actually surprised, it being a 2-parter, that there was no torture at all. I thought that because the torture was so big in part 2, and that's what everybody remembers, I thought that there was going to be some in part 1, so it actually permeated more of this 2-parter for people to remember it. But it's like everybody remembers part 2.
Well, yeah, it is strange that people seem to remember the gruesome torture over the.
It's amazing that everybody knows it's a 2-parter and everybody talks about the torture. But like, if I were to ask somebody what happened in part 1 of this, like I don't think anybody would be able to answer that.
I do remember Picard and the team sort of making their way, sort of an espionage element to it.
Okay. But
I had forgotten how little espionage there was and how much torture there was in the second one. I thought it was like a couple of scenes of implied torture, right?
Gotcha. Mm-hmm.
But boy, was I incorrect.
Yeah.
About the amount of torture that they are actually showing. And it's funny, like they found a way to show the torture of showing extreme pain on Picard's being inflicted upon Picard without needing to show violence.
Right.
Which was a clever way out of that sort of problem, which I'm sure the network television people said, hey, you can't, we're waiting for 24 to come out in order to do that. Until 24 comes out, we cannot show torture on television.
Yeah, no, it was definitely to get past the censors, for sure.
Right.
And one of the things that makes David Warner so good as the torturer is just, he does have that one moment at the start of it where Picard isn't listening, and he says, okay, you've lost all humanity in you. You don't have a rank, you don't have a name, like you are just human. And, that's kind of where he gets a little bit emotional. But other than that, like he is so pleasant, and that's always so creepy when the villain, is just like, just do what I ask and everything is fine. The
sort of the good cop, bad cop without the bad cop.
Right.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
I appreciated it because he wasn't just immediately hateable. He wasn't just a goon or somebody. He wasn't like Jellicoe. Right. Where you immediately don't like him. You kind of almost in a way were wondering like, okay, is he going to end up sort of at the end of this being redeemed in some way, which he wasn't. Surprisingly, he was just as bad as he was at the beginning of the second part than he was at the end, right?
Well, I think even more so because he knew that he was supposed to let Picard go, and he ignored that to try to break him.
Right.
So it wasn't that he was a prisoner of war or a terrorist or anything like that. It was legitimately like I know that my time with you is done, and I'm going to continue doing this to you.
Right. He didn't care.
I just want to back up a little bit to you saying, like, we don't hate him in the same way that we do Jellicoe. And I thought we'd already covered this, but I didn't hate Jellicoe. Like, he was a war captain, and he was trying to get the ship ready for a battle should it need it. And I mean, he kind of said, like, he said to Deanna, like, he doesn't have time for a honeymoon, and he said to Picard, he doesn't have time to give anyone a chance because they've got 51 hours before they're in Cardassian territory.
Right.
You know, so I
agree. I didn't hate him either. I guess I just feel like I didn't like him. Right. It made you miss Picard.
And for sure. Okay.
Just
I
looking from the outside of it, like he was designed to be unlikable.
Yes.
Right. From the beginning.
Right. Well, what was so cool about it though was he was designed to be unlikable, but still be, you know, kind of older people like our ages now, like mid-30s and I mean probably like mid-30s up. They were supposed to understand. Like he wasn't supposed to be likable, but you were supposed to understand where he was coming from. And when I first watched this, when I was like 15 or 16, I was, you know, he was a dick, he was a jerk, and I didn't like him. Now that I'm watching it, I'm like, okay, I understand where you're coming from. It's one of those things where I'd almost be willing to like give him the benefit of the doubt that over time he would have softened up to the crew had he stayed on as captain when it wasn't like wartime. But because we only saw him in this one scenario, and because he had specific and high expectations of the crew, like they were just all pouty about the fact that he wasn't Picard.
Yeah, I think that they played up their reaction because, again, what we saw from Jellicoe was him giving orders about administrative stuff,
right, and
day-to-day operations, which we never see Picard do. But it's understood, I think, that he does do those things. That he does assign people to shifts and sort of he makes orders that people don't like, right? We just don't ever get to see it.
Because it was administrative day-to-day things, I think that after being on the ship for 6 years, Picard was no longer asking people to do them because they were running them so smoothly. And this, you know, he's coming in and he's saying, okay, we're changing all of these things. And both Riker and Geordi are like, why? The way we have it currently run works.
Then they kind of cover that in the one scene where we're supposed to get some sort of catharsis for the a-hole that Jellicoe is with Riker.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt a little empty to me.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, they sort of have Riker kind of dress him down, even though Riker was already undressed and ready to go in his robe. By the way, were you surprised that Riker lounges in a robe?
So you saying that, like, I didn't think about it at all until just now, but I wonder, because Picard kind of does too, and I wonder if it's because it's easier to throw my
get out of.
Well, yeah, it's easier, right?
In case somebody walks in.
Your mouth says shields up, but your body says hull breach imminent.
Nice.
Thanks.
It's on a t-shirt, by the way.
Okay. No, like, but they just lounge around in kind of nothing because it's easier to get back into uniform than to take something off and then get your uniform back on. Like if if there's a red alert and they're suddenly needed at the bridge, like,
right.
You know, that would be my thought as to why, like, everybody lounges in loungewear.
Well, it's so kind of, I don't know, it's like a robe, right? Like it's very Hugh Hefner, right? Like,
could you at least tie it before I come in? Like, before you say come?
Oh, no, I think he was in the middle of untying it as somebody walks in, just in case, right? I think perhaps Riker was expecting somebody else, yeah. Or maybe that was the person he was exactly expecting.
Right. I heard you were looking for me.
Now that all that foreplay about all the shift reassignments is done, we can get to the real business. But yeah, like that scene, I felt like, okay, I kind of knew it when that scene happened, that was it. That was my catharsis for the a-hole getting their comeuppance. But
right.
Because nothing else ever happens from that, right? Mm-hmm. We kind of forego, at the end of the episode, we forego this is the consequence of being a hardened militant captain to Picard getting therapy from Troy, right? Which I understood. That was what the episode was about. It wasn't necessarily about Jellicoe. By the way, I mean, unless this is months and months later that they're giving the command of the Enterprise back to Picard, that just would be a very bad idea to give somebody who was just tortured, most likely suffering from post-traumatic stress.
Have a debriefing with the counselor, like, and that's his.
Yeah, I mean, it was very. I mean, it was a very poignant moment to end the
Mhm.
episode on.
Mm-hmm.
But just as a logistics, it would be years before he was allowed to touch command.
Right.
I mean, unless it actually was years, we don't know. You never know.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely wasn't years. Like,
Yeah.
you know, it may have been longer than him recovering and getting clean, you know, taking a hot shower and coming back onto the bridge. But
Right.
yeah, definitely.
It wasn't the next day. I mean, it was probably weeks later. I'm
right.
guessing.
But I mean, even then, like, that doesn't quite add up because, like, why would he not talk to Deanna as the counselor before that?
Well, yeah. I mean, and they make it clear this is the first time they're meeting.
Right.
And because he says, I don't know where to begin.
Right.
Like you normally do when you're broaching a subject you've never broached before.
Right.
You don't say that halfway into a conversation.
I don't know where to begin this 10th session.
I don't know where to begin the second half of my story.
So did you notice when Data was in his first officer attire when he was on the bridge, he was sitting in Riker's pose?
Really? Oh, I totally missed it.
Yeah.
Damn it.
Yeah.
I will say it was very disturbing to me to see him in a different colored uniform.
Yes.
It was very weird. I don't know if it's because his makeup, it was in some way designed to complement his uniform. And so when you put him in something different, it automatically clashes. But I was just like, oh God, I need to adjust for a moment. Pause it and just look at it for a second.
Desaturate.
So I can, yeah, exactly. It was very weird, but I'm going to go back and watch it now because that's what a great little moment of Brent Spiner. Because I'm sure Brent Spiner did that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So now we need an episode of him being first officer, but like Riker, right? Where he sits down like Riker does, and he kind of walks away, like, you know how Riker like walks away from a scene?
Uh-huh.
Is his body turns before his neck does, you know? So it's all like his body is out the door, but he's still looking at you,
Right.
You know?
Okay. Yeah.
And then his neck finally catches up with his body. A little bit of that. And he kind of walks with, like, when he's walking away, I don't know if it's because he's tall and he's afraid of his head hitting the top of the set, but he always walks with his head tilted to the side a little bit.
Right, like he's kind of leading with a shoulder. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
totally.
Yeah.
Like he's ready for business. I was genuinely disturbed at all the torture stuff. Like, there's a scene where I believe it's an act out, where David Warner clicks his remote control torture device, and Picard is just sitting there, like, gyrating in pain, and he's saying something. It doesn't matter what he's saying.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that he was the guy was essentially it was electroshock therapy, and he's defying him through the whole thing. I mean, it was very uncomfortable that the torturer was not stopping out of anger rather than torture,
right?
You know, and I mean, at that point, Picard completely has the upper hand. No matter how much he's getting tortured, it's not as a means to break him. It's to
get back at him.
Yeah, as to get back at him, as to punish him.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and I felt like that was the best writing, and I mean, maybe this is where Mike and I agree in terms of it being a great episode of Star Trek, in that the writing was just really on mark in terms of having a very solid idea of who your antagonist was and who your protagonist was, and letting the scene not be about that, but it was sort of soaked in the essence of that.
Right.
Where, you know, I mean, their conversations were rarely about the information that they wanted from Picard. It was more about the psychological interplay between the two people. And that was, I guess, my favorite part. I mean, am I allowed to have a favorite part of torture scenes? I don't know. But that was very interesting to me. And I don't really like watching torture, unless it's Jack Bauer. If they had hired Jack Bauer to do the torturing, I would have been much better. But
as a Cardassian,
I didn't really like it. Yeah, as a Cardassian. Oh, if they had. But it's Jack Bauer in Cardassian makeup, right? So he still has like the leather jacket on.
Sure. Well, yeah,
and the cell phone that never runs out of battery.
Near the beginning, he David Warner, I wish I could remember what his character's name was, the Cardassian. He says, like, you've already told us you know nothing, and I believe you. So now all you have to do is just tell me how many lights there are. Yeah, and that's where the breaking began. He
was trying to do what the Borg had already achieved, which was turn him into a drone, I guess, right? Which they weren't able to do.
Well, and I love at the end when he's free to go, he has that hesitation on 4. Like, and I don't know if it was intentional, but the way I read it is Picard is genuinely trying to remember which number is correct.
Yeah. Yeah, it was well. I mean, it was well executed. I mean, he even says at the end, "I thought I saw 5 lights."
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell. Was this commentary, or was this just like it started to sort of steep into that of exposing the terrors of and the consequence of torture, or was it just using torture as a plot device? I couldn't tell where we were with that.
I mean, that's just going to be speculation. There was nothing that I found whether or not it was supposed to be a social commentary beyond what Picard says. You know, like history has shown, or time and time again, like tests have shown, studies have shown that
torture doesn't work.
Yeah, torture doesn't work. Yeah, like I said, beyond that being the point, I don't know if there was any more commentary, intentional commentary to it, or if it was just they had this great idea of what's interesting is David Warner wasn't even supposed to be the Cardassian for whatever reason. Like the person who got the job had to be replaced, and so David Warner found out 3 days before, and so he is reading all of his lines off screen.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. He did have a lot too. He had a lot to say.
Right. Which is what makes, I mean, they're just 2 powerhouses in the scene together. To be able to have your lines thrown at you, hours before you're going on, so you have no idea, you don't have time to rehearse it and memorize it and anything like that. You're literally just reading it, but you're reading it in a way that provides resonance for the other person to respond to.
Right. Which is, to me, the mark of a professional. I mean, I don't think he was working miracles. I think that should be an ability of any actor, is to be given something on short notice and make something of it. I would think that you should be good at that point, at doing that, at acting, I guess, I don't want to turn him into a genius just because he only had the lines for 3. But he does, you're right, he does like an amazing job at creating this kind of warm and fuzzy character who also is torturing Picard.
Right. I agree with you about the acting side of things. It's just the longer you have a script, the more time you have to figure out the nuances, and exactly how you're going to say something or gesture or, what other thoughts you could be having in your mind as you're saying these things, and how would it come out if you were doing that? You've got more time to practice it. And so the less time you have, the more likely you are to say something that is either emphasized wrong or, just doesn't give off as much gravitas as David Warner did. As many actors can, but it's just, it is the mark of a quality actor versus somebody who, is either still learning their craft or is doing it for other reasons.
I wonder who he replaced.
I know, me too.
Just
yeah.
Kiefer Sutherland?
No! So yeah, I mean, you kind of said like that conversation, the debriefing to Worf and Crusher was the part that, I mean, was inherently sci-fi, but there really wasn't anything that couldn't be adjusted to make this a heist episode or an espionage episode of something. And I mean, because we know the characters and because the actors are so good and the script was so solid, like this is a great episode of TV, but I don't feel like there is enough sci-fi to make it Star Trek.
Yeah. And you would expect there to be some, I mean, not even the stuff on the ship where they're redoing ship stuff. I mean, there was a lot of technobabble with Geordi and them doing something to the warp core.
Right, and the warp coils,
it had no bearing on the show,
right,
or on the episode. It was just them, giving a reason for Geordi to complain.
Right.
Basically.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and it was fun to watch Data, because we all love Data. Everybody loves Data. In our new segment, everybody loves Data.
It's not new. It's been around since like episode 3.
Well, this part is. This is a new part of it.
Okay.
Yeah. This is episode 29 of our new segment. Our new episode of the old segment.
Oh my God, what were you going to say? No, I'm not going to.
It's him sort of staying true to his duty and his post, which is, what the captain said is actually doable.
Right.
You have to do this, this, and this. And it's not, I'm going to protect my friend Geordi right now.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to be Data and do what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
And I don't know, whenever I hear Data talk, I just listen.
Well, which is why I loved, like, that's what I was saying. Like, Jellicoe took him everywhere he went.
Yeah, he made him first officer.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And I don't know, is Data next in line for that? I guess he is. I guess he would be next in line for first officer.
I think so, yeah. Lieutenant Commander, yeah.
It wasn't just because Jellicoe likes him.
Right.
Yeah. I guess wouldn't you make Data everything, right? Like just he can do everything. He can do multiple things. He doesn't need to take shift changes or anything like that. Just make him everything.
Right. I mean, he would definitely be the swing shift captain, but you do need other bodies because, I mean, as able as he is for everything, he can't do everything at once. So I do get that you would have to have other people to man stuff, but absolutely, like I would have him be lead on shifts around the different areas.
Well, can't he plug himself into the computer with a USB cable and just sort of run things remotely? Like, he doesn't have to actually use his digital fingers and like touch the screen. Can't he just, right? Can he Bluetooth himself into the computer and just run it that way, like directly?
I don't know.
He should be able to. He does that. I mean, they have a cable that connects to the back of his head for diagnostics and stuff like that.
Yeah, I feel like there was an episode that did that.
Well, they definitely do that when Barclay becomes like a superhuman.
Right, but I mean, that was just with Barclay. Yeah.
And Barclay's no Data, or Data's no Barclay. That's a good one, too. I can't wait for that episode.
There are so many.
I think that's...
Yeah. All right, what's next?
Enterprise, Season 3, Episode 8, Twilight.
We're doing a lot of Season 3 from Enterprise.
I know. It's so weird that most of the Enterprise episodes we've watched has been in Season 3. Anyway, refusing to leave a T'Pol behind... The Archer is struck by an anomaly, leaving his brain infected with parasites that prevent him from making new memories. Oh, could be interesting.
Right.
Although it could be totally wrong, because whoever wrote this has never seen Star Trek a day in their life.
Yeah.
That sounds interesting. I do want to see if there's a T'Pol in this movie. I've always wanted to see a T'Pol.
I mean, I've seen several T'Pols, I guess. Have I?
I think the plural goes on the T, you know?
The Tizpol?
It's like attorneys general, you know? Like,
okay.
Yeah. Tizpol.
Right. That's how you should introduce yourself.
Tizpol, return!
No, to me, this does not sound interesting. I feel like it's just one of those stupid.
It sort of smacks of a clip show, but it's not at the end of like an episode or like, you know what I mean. It's not.
There's only
season.
Well, right, and there's only one episode in the whole Star Trek franchise that is a clip show. So
really,
yeah,
not even in Enterprise.
Yeah,
interesting.
Yeah. So when somebody like loses their memory, if that is the main plot and it's not just, you know, what happens in the cold open and there's more to it than that, it feels, I worry it's going to be like the Voyager episode where it's the same conversations every time.
Over and over and over again, yeah. I mean, the only thing that may be good about this episode, that may redeem it, is it's going to have a lot of the Doctor in it, who I like. Phlox,
yeah,
you don't like.
Yeah, that would totally redeem it.
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll see.
Yeah, let's go watch it.
Let's go watch it.